Today, we honor Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. This year's theme, Creating the Beloved Community, highlights Dr. King's inspiring vision of a world anchored in justice, equality, and compassion, where love triumphs over hate. On March 27, 1968, just 8 days before his assassination, at a rally in Newark, New Jersey, he said, "We must recognize our dignity and worth as human beings. The doors of opportunity are opening now, and we've got to be ready to enter." As a young reporter for United Press International, I was there. And so it's fitting that our guest today is Devin Gray, president of End Poverty in California, or EPIC, since 2023. Devin sees poverty as a solvable problem. Under his leadership, EPIC engages directly with those most affected by poverty, ensuring their voices shape the solutions that impact their lives. Prior to joining EPIC, Devin was a director with Evergreen Strategy Group, where he advised gun violence prevention organizations on policy and communications. He's a graduate of Stanford Law School and the Stanford Graduate School of Education. Hey, Devin, thanks so much for joining us as we honor Dr. King today. I really do appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me, Bob.
Yeah. Hey, how did Dr. King's work influence what you're doing today to combat poverty in California?
Tremendously. I mean, we can draw a real straight line to it. So, in the final years of King's life, particularly in 1967, he published a book called Where Do We Go From Here, which
Yeah.
was really focused on how do we secure economic justice now that we've secured wins on the civil rights front.
Mhm.
And he speaks extensively about poverty, but the policy prescription that he advances, perhaps more notably than others, is this concept of a guaranteed income. And the idea that in a country with immense abundance, but simultaneously with immense amounts of poverty, we have the ability, if we have the political will to do so, to provide a basic floor for all Americans to be able to find economic stability. And that directly impacts the work that we do. My organization was founded by the former mayor of Stockton, California, Michael Tubbs, who introduced the first guaranteed income pilot led by any mayor in modern American history, where they gave several dozen families cash assistance every month consistently for 24 months, and the results were fantastic. And so I think that provides a model for how we address poverty across the country, whether it be expansion of the safety net or direct cash payments in a more straightforward way. But the overarching point of King's message, I think, more than anything else, is that it's not simply enough for us to focus on the equality of civil rights. Obviously, it's a necessary condition, but if we're not using the immense wealth that we have as a country to provide a stable economic floor for folks, we're really missing the mark on what equality looks like in the country. So I think particularly as we go into this next administration, folks, the president being inaugurated today, if we don't have a focus on poverty and look back to the message of King from the 60s, from the late 60s, we're going to be missing the mark.
Yeah, it just leads me into my next question, which was what are your thoughts about the future, the next 4 years with Trump as the president of the United States?
I think we're in a moment of tremendous precarity for working families across the country. And I think we know that from the policy agenda that we see congressional Republicans advancing now, that we know will be rubber stamped by this next administration across a couple of fronts. One is the extension of the Trump era tax cuts, which saw wealth be directed towards the 1%, massive cuts in the corporate tax rate, and real tax cuts for the wealthiest individual filers as well. And that's going to come at the expense of safety net spending. And we just saw a couple weeks ago that congressional Republicans have upwards of $5 trillion of cuts planned for various social programs. They won't get all of it over the line, of course, because it's a really unpopular agenda, but massive cuts to programs like Medicare and Medicaid, to SNAP, to TANF, our welfare programs, and a range of other really important programs that people rely on. So I think we run the risk of losing ground in terms of the actual policy debates that we're having. I find optimism, however, hopefully, in our ability to continue to tell a really effective story about what people are experiencing, and the fact that over time, I think working families and working individuals and folks who supported this incoming president will realize that the Republican agenda just is not going to put more money in their pockets, and they're going to be worse off in 4 years.
I just don't understand why it is that so many people in that income category supported Donald Trump. I just don't understand that. Do you?
I don't. I mean, I think we can try to reverse engineer a rationale, right? I think people are really hurting. I think people have seen the ladder for economic mobility get pulled up, which is real, which is real. I can't find, I can't explain away the idea that his policy prescriptions are going to be what gets people to achieve economic security. But I
Yeah.
understand the angst and I understand the anger with the
Yeah.
status quo because it's not working for people. I just think that the solutions that he's proposing are incredibly wrong.
Yeah, it's just too bad that given those issues that you just alluded to, that the guy they turn to for a solution is the very guy that is going to or that wants to enact programs that will hurt them. I don't understand why people vote against their own self-interest, but they do. Now, what challenges do you envision as your organization, Epic, works on dealing with these issues?
Yeah, I mean, at least certainly in California, we're not short of resources and we're not short of political capital and we're not short of intellectual capital. We have a lot of smart people here and a lot of people who are oriented towards ending poverty. I think at the federal
Uh,
level, obviously, it's a very different political makeup and that presents its own challenges. But I think both at the state and the federal level, the issue that we come up against time and time again are outdated beliefs about poverty, its causes, and the people experiencing it. So, what I mean by that is we have a very deeply ingrained societal belief that poverty is an inevitability, that it's always going to be with us, that it can't be solved. And I think that has a chilling effect on people taking big swings to try to end it. And we also have outdated beliefs about why poverty is experienced by some people in some communities and not others. And that really derives, I think, from this belief that at its core, poverty is an individual failing rather than a structural policy failure that makes it an inevitability for millions of people. And
yeah.
if we're able to overcome that belief, I think that opens up the channels for enacting and more importantly, prioritizing the types of policies that we know will have a really positive impact for people, like an expanded child tax credit, which we saw back in 2021 have massive positive impacts on poor people.
Devin, what misconceptions are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have going back, centuries now, really go back to the Horatio Alger myths that if anyone works hard and pulls themselves up by their bootstraps, they can find economic security, if not immense wealth. That there's this belief that there is
Yeah.
a one-to-one correlation between hard work and
Mhm.
economic success. And I think for those of us who are either proximate to poverty or spend time in communities that have experienced poverty or have been poor ourselves, we know that that simply isn't true. And we know that social mobility in this country is declining. But it's those beliefs that are so deeply ingrained that I think enables policymakers to not prioritize the types of policies that would make economic mobility more achievable. And again, we've
Mhm.
seen evidence of this. We saw the expanded child tax credit cut child poverty in half, more or less
Mhm.
overnight, but it didn't get renewed because of those outdated beliefs. And we have, people talked about this. People said that giving people money is going to lead to them spending money on drugs, and
Yeah.
that wasn't true. And it led
Yeah.
to 3 million kids being put back into poverty the next year.
Yeah, those outdated beliefs, they're all over the place. I mean, here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I live, there's a young man who hangs out on the street outside of Walmart at a corner. He's there all the time, and with a sign, he's looking for help. I think his sign says that he's a vet, a homeless vet. And on this local social media channel
Mm.
called Next Door, I think it's called.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Uh,
infamous.
yeah. Some person mentioned this and said that her heart went out to this guy, and when she goes by there, she stops and tries to give him, something to drink, something to keep him warm, and so on. And this other person commented, "Well, he doesn't have to be there. He's there because he wants to be there. He's there because he is too lazy to work. He's probably more making more money than I do," was his response. And I was really proud because 30 or 40 people came on there and smacked the guy down for saying that. But it just goes to prove your point that there is that mindset that people are poor because they're either lazy
Yeah.
or just prefer to be that way, right?
Yeah, and when you say it out loud, doesn't it just sound even sillier?
Doesn't it?
The idea that someone should, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But I think the fact that people are pushing back on that and people increasingly realize that that's an idiotic view
Yeah.
shows that we're making some progress in telling a more effective story. We have a long way to go,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's encouraging. It's
Okay.
encouraging.
Now, the census data shows that California's poverty rate increased to 18.9% in 2023 from 16.4% in 2022, and it was even lower than that in 2021. The state's poverty rate was particularly high among Black and Latinx Californians. Now, why is that? And what is Epic doing to combat that trend?
Yeah, so not only are we trending in the wrong direction, over a 3-year average, California has had pretty consistently the highest poverty rate of any state in the country
Yeah.
when you take into account cost of living. And it is about the cost of living.
Uh-huh.
Sort of view to put it simply, poverty exists when you have really high cost of living and or wages that don't keep up with the cost of living, and we have problems on both ends.
Yeah.
Our minimum wage is $16 an hour. It needs to be much higher, obviously, but it really is housing costs that drive the vast majority of the poverty in the state, and there are reasons for that. Obviously, it's a desirable place to live, particularly in our coastal communities, though not just in our coastal communities, and our failure to build an adequate amount of housing at all income levels, certainly affordable housing, we're at least 1 million units behind where we need to be, but also even market rate housing, constraining the ability to build across the state has made prices go up for everyone. And it's pushing people out. It's not pushing businesses out as much as people think, but it is, people are being displaced internally within California. So someone might get priced out of San Francisco and they have to go to Oakland. Someone from Oakland might be priced out and they have to go to Vallejo to Stockton, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of economic refugees that are being created by our housing crisis. That's the main reason why so many people are experiencing poverty in the state and why we outrank all others in the country.
Hmm.
What we're trying to do about it is multifaceted, though, because we have to talk about why things are so expensive, but also why people don't have enough money in their pockets, both with regard to income and to wealth, to do something to actually have economic security. So, trying to work with the state and other actors, other advocates to build more affordable housing. Certainly, that's a really long, challenging fight. But in the short term, obviously, we're trying to push for guaranteed income programs, trying to make our safety net more accessible to make sure that folks who are struggling can easily receive and consistently receive more money through the safety net and through our welfare programs and programs like SNAP that provide food assistance, and baby bonds to seed wealth in low-income folks who don't have the luxury of receiving inheritance from parents like middle and upper income folks do. So we were able to help get the state's largest or nation's largest and state's first baby bonds program passed a couple of years ago that we believe will start seeing grants of around $4,500 go out to nearly 60,000 kids across the state later this year, which is really exciting. So trying to
Wow.
seed the state's wealth into particularly foster youth and kids who've lost a parent to COVID. So we're really excited about that. But
Yeah.
it's a long way to go. And I think it would be naive to think that a single program is going to change such a large problem, but we have to start somewhere. And it's going to
Yeah.
require even bigger action at the state level.
Okay, as we are recording this today, which is Monday, the 13th of January, your state is being devastated. The LA area, at least, is being devastated by horrible wildfires. I think I read today that 16 people have died, and that's probably going to increase, I'm sure. Many, many, many people are losing their homes, not just the wealthy. I would like to know what you think the impact of all of this is going to be on the constituency that you represent. I've read that rents are likely to skyrocket. I've read that that most likely people are going to have difficulty even finding a place to live in the interim. I've read that many, many, many people are not going to be able to afford to rebuild their homes, despite the fact that the federal government has said that it will cover the cost of rebuilding. What are your thoughts about all of this? And what do you think you guys are going to face going forward in dealing with the impact of these fires?
It's an unspeakable tragedy what's happening. There's no other way to put it. And obviously, our heart goes out to the dozen plus folks who have lost their lives, but I mean, countless number of folks who have lost their homes. It's just horrible. And you mentioned some of the downstream effects of this beyond folks who have lost everything, sort of considered like the first ring of people who have been affected by this. But there is a secondary ring as well. Folks who maybe haven't lost their homes, but are, like you mentioned, going to be faced with rising rents.
Right.
Heard secondhand from a partner organization of ours who's working with folks in the Altadena area. There's a large black middle class there, and an older woman who's in her late 80s is on fixed income. She's retired, obviously, who lost her home, who can't find any single unit apartment in the area for under $2,500, and she can't afford that, and she's not sure where she's going to go after she has to leave
Incredible.
the shelter. It's horrible.
Incredible.
But even folks who haven't lost their homes are going to be feeling the impacts of rent increases, and it's
Sure.
because again we have a constrained housing market, which has made the availability of rental units quite small. And then you have this influx of people who are trying to find housing. It just, the math doesn't work in the same way, right? So we're going to see prices go up. There are many people as well, especially low-income folks who relied on jobs in the areas that have been affected. So if you are uh, doing work in someone's home, if you're a gardener, a housekeeper, if you're doing any sort of work that is domestic labor for others in the area, you might not live in the area, but you no longer have the availability to get income from the houses that you might be tending to. And that's a real loss as well, especially for low-income folks. And a lot of those folks aren't going to be eligible for unemployment insurance as well, which is devastating for people.
And
So, so many externalities from this.
that's because many of those homes where they used to work, to clean, to garden, to do whatever, that those homes are not there
Yeah,
anymore. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. No, that's it's very real. And so we're worried about a lot of displacement. We're worried about lost wages. And I think, obviously we see the way that the media is covering this, and they should be covering it breathlessly because it's a huge story. But I think it's really important that the story that we're telling and communicating to the rest of the country and to state government as well is that this is not a tragedy that's just affecting the wealthiest among us. Yes, a lot of wealthy people have been affected by the fires, but
Mhm.
LA is a big and very economically diverse city and county, and there
Mhm.
are a lot of folks whose names you will never know, who live in neighborhoods you've never heard of, who are being really impacted by this. And it's important that we are really clear about who's hurting here because that's going to dictate the kinds of policy prescriptions that get prioritized by both state and federal government. I think it's great that the governor is trying to fast track the permitting process for rebuilding homes in the area. But we need to make sure that that kind of urgency is also applied to the low income folks who maybe don't need their homes rebuilt, but need forms of cash assistance to get by to replace the lost wages that the fires have brought on them. So we're really interested in trying to see if the state can do direct cash payments, not dissimilar to what it did during the pandemic. I think that would be really useful for folks who are below a certain income level who can just get those kinds of bridge payments to get them over the line, and replacement for unemployment insurance as well for folks who've lost work as a consequence of the fires, but they maybe aren't eligible for traditional unemployment insurance. I think it's really important.
Okay, so you guys are going to be advocating for all of that, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just on a call today with got 20 other organizations, and we're trying to get our ducks in a row. These things move really fast. And I think
Mhm.
what's dangerous about the moment that we're in is we are seeing, I think, bad faith actors try to politicize the situation that's happening right now because they know that they can score political points against California as a whole, against local leadership, when really what we need is solidarity in this moment to get people out of what is a ruinous situation for so many people in the LA area. So it's moving fast, but I'm optimistic that we can find resources from the state to be able to help people in a real time of need and with urgency and speed as well.
Yeah, okay. All right, moving beyond California, Trump's threatening to impose these high tariffs on imported goods. Many
Yeah,
economists say that'll only worsen inflation and especially hurt low-income people.
yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? Hey guys, I'm Bob Gaddy, founder and host of Lean to the Left. I'm excited to share our new book, Hijack Nation: Donald Trump's Attack on America's Greatness, co-authored with political analyst and professor C.J. Waldron. In Hijack Nation, we delve into the unfolding story of America's political landscape through a series of essays from leantotheleft.net. We explore how Donald Trump's presidency has transformed American politics, challenging our values and institutions. Hijack Nation isn't just a book, it's a call to action. It invites you to reflect on what it means to be American in a divided political landscape. Together we can reclaim our nation's greatness. So get your copy of Hijack Nation today. Visit leantotheleft.net and click on the Books tab to learn more and to order.
I think it's exactly right. It's a tax on goods. It's a tax on consumers, right?
Yeah.
And for someone who ran on trying to bring down the price of eggs, again, like I was saying earlier, I really think that people are going to come to the end of Trump's term and realize, wow, like I actually really did not benefit from this economically at all. And I think people are right to be frustrated with increased prices for goods. I think that's very real. But obviously tariffs aren't going to bring the desired outcome. So it's a real shame. It's a real shame.
Well,
And
and
I
the
think we're
combination.
seeing
I'm sorry.
distractions from the administration as well.
Yeah, and
No,
then
so
and
so I think,
that combined with his mass deportation plan
yeah,
is just going to make it doubly hard for people.
absolutely. I think certainly in California it's the case, and increasingly across the country, that the housing crisis really is driving the most pernicious parts of the cost of living crisis. And if you're planning on deporting people who disproportionately contribute to the housing industry and the construction industry, there's no way in hell that you're going to be able to create enough homes to drive down prices in order for
Yeah.
people to experience a decrease in the cost of living. So it's ridiculous. And I think you see with all of this talk and bluster about trying to annex Greenland and make Canada a state, all of this nonsense, it
Mhm.
really is to distract voters in the American public from the reality that he is not going to be able to deliver on his campaign promises.
Yeah. All right. So the 24 presidential election was really disappointing for many of us. What can Democrats do to regain the trust of working class voters that they seem to have lost, at least in large measure, resulting in Trump's election victory?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think the way that we talk about issues has to be in the language that people use. And I think that is going to require us to be really thoughtful about the policies that we prioritize, try to get out of the think tank speak that admittedly folks like me, frankly, sometimes in the nonprofit industrial complex can oftentimes be guilty of. But I think it's important that the way that we communicate issues is that we're meeting people where they are. I think it also means that the candidates that we recruit for office should be from the communities that we are trying to represent effectively. And again, I say this as someone who's been fortunate to receive a really good education. We don't need people with Ivy League degrees always running for office, right? And then third, and I think most importantly, I think where we do have political power in blue states and in blue cities and in blue counties, it's imperative that we deliver demonstrably positive results in our governance. I think people see states like California and other blue states, our inability to make sure that the cost of living is reasonable for folks, that people have an opportunity to build wealth and achieve a real economic foothold. Our failures there are not ignored. And we have to show that blue state governance can be a model for the rest of the country rather than our results on the ground being a liability when it comes to campaign season. So I think
Yeah.
we have a lot of work ahead of us in California to show that our model and giving us political power will yield good results for folks because I don't think people see that.
No, I think you're right about that. And actually, the Republicans and Trump have successfully, I think, used California as a kind of a whipping boy in a lot of
Absolutely.
ways. I mean, you guys are you guys are the most liberal state in the country.
In
That's
some ways.
shown.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's shown in your energy policies, which are wonderful in my opinion. But the idea of mandating that everybody's going to have an electric vehicle by such and such a date, that was used by the Republicans to show how stupid and demanding and I don't know what all the California government is. And
Yeah.
now with with these fires, they're using them politically against California and California's leaders, including your governor.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong. I mean, why aren't they pulling together and trying to help instead of doing that? I mean, it's just crazy in my opinion.
Yeah. It's deeply cynical. It's deeply cynical.
Yeah,
And I think in sort of the heightened polarization that we're experiencing in our political moment, which I think
yeah,
principally, of course, has been created and driven and exacerbated by Trump, everything becomes about scoring points, about,
yeah,
trying to stick it to the out group and people in, folks on the other side view California as an enemy, which is a real shame because we have a
yeah,
lot of political diversity here and people are hurting. So, it's I think there's real critiques to be leveled as to why, you know, we are experiencing the disasters that we're experiencing, our sort of collective failures on climate, land use policy that have led to us building homes in places that are prone to fires. That's all up for debate. But I think what shouldn't be up for debate is whether, our governor has to kiss the ring to get federal support or whether we're going to come together and link arms to try to rescue people from the hardest thing they've probably ever had to go through. And I think if the shoe were on the other foot, we wouldn't see that. And we've not seen that. We've seen plenty of natural disasters hit red states. And I think we've always tried to provide support where we can. And I'd like to think that the vast majority of Americans are hurting for Californians in the way that we are here. I just think it's a shame that there are political opportunists, both in the media and in elected office, who are trying to score points here. It's a real shame.
yeah, exactly. Now, I don't know if this is a fair question, but it we started out by talking about Dr. Martin Luther King.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering what you think he might do if he were here today
Wow.
in a position of leadership. What do you think he would do?
That's a really good question. It's a really hard question. I think that he would be appalled by the lack of progress that we've made on income and wealth inequality.
Yeah.
Um, we have a wealth gap today nationwide that's as broad as it was, as wide as it was when the Civil Rights Act of 64 was passed. We've not made progress on it. And I think that the I'm sure he would have a very nuanced view on why we're in the political moment that we're in, and it would be a very
Hmm.
intersectional view of race and class and everything else.
Hmm.
But I do think that, and I think there are leaders who are doing this in the spirit of King. I think that there would be a real effort to try to build a multiracial coalition to fight for the economic justice that we all benefit from. And I think we've suffered from the racialization of poverty, which has been an intentional move by the right, in my view, to say
Hmm.
that issues that pertain to poor people are really about Black and brown folks. And
Hmm.
knowing that being able to drive a wedge like that will siphon off support from poor white folks. And
Hmm.
again, there are more poor white folks than any other race, percentage wise, obviously, as
Hmm.
representative, it's not the same, but in absolute numbers, there's been a really deliberate, I think, successful effort to try to break up the solidarity of working people across the country. And it's come to the detriment of all of us. It really has. So I think if we could go back in time and have King be, around today, my suspicion is that we would see a real effort to bridge together a multiracial, interclass coalition for economic justice. And I think the writings towards the end of his life give us a hint as to where his orientation was in the last couple of years.
Okay. What about you? What's your next move? Are you planning to run for office?
Not anytime soon. No, I think our priority right now is trying to make sure that the bills that we've helped get over the line in the legislature and that have been signed into law are implemented correctly. I think just my point earlier about blue states really having to demonstrate that we can deliver on our promises. It's not just enough for us to have a bill signed into law and sort of say, wipe our hands and say good job. It's really the 50% mark where we've got another halfway to go, where we've got to make sure that the dollars that have been allocated reach people's pockets. So that's going to be our focus, particularly on the state's baby bonds program, which we're really excited about and hopefully is an example for other jurisdictions and example of the state reimagining its role in trying to close the wealth gap. We're really excited about that. And yeah, really just trying to show that progressive policies can work in a tangible way that folks can wrap their arms around and see material improvements. Because if we aren't able to do that, I think we will continue to lose our mandate to govern more than we already have.
Okay. Well, I can't believe that with all of this, you wouldn't have some designs on being in public office in some way.
I think there's a lot of ways to help people, and there's a lot of ways to help people.
You know, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, this guy's dodging this question. I think.
Give it time. No, but no immediate designs.
Uh,
Our founder, Mayor Tubbs, is running for lieutenant governor. We're really excited about that. That race is in 26. I'm not involved in any way, but I think we're going to see just by virtue of term limits, we're going to see a big change in who's in office statewide in California in a couple of years, because a lot of
okay.
folks are termed out.
Okay.
And that's really exciting. So my hope is that our ability to influence state policy will continue to grow. And again, we can put red points on the board for people.
Okay. Devin, listen, I want to thank you for being with us on our podcast today. I enjoyed talking to you. I think your message is one that people really do need to pay attention to. And so I thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your views and your hopes about what might be able to happen in the future. I thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Bob. This is really fun.